Good morning, Foxes class, and welcome to our writing lesson today. Today we are going to be moving on to innovating the problem of our story. So yesterday we did the build-up. Today we are going to go on to the problem. So it's all starting to go a bit wrong for our main character. Like every day, can you put the date and LO into your book for me, please? And then after that, I would like you to have a go at editing your build-up. So when you are editing, the things I would like you to check for are: did you remember a comma after your fronted adverbial? Is your handwriting neat and joined? And have you gone back through and checked your spellings? So date and LO for me, and then have a go at editing your build-up. Okay, brilliant. Now we're going to start our lesson just like every other lesson by practicing our story map. So under Thursday the 7th of January on our class page, you will find the video of our story map. Have a practice for me. Hopefully most of it you know off by heart by now. Okay, so today we are going to go on to innovating our problem. Now I'm going to go back first of all to my build-up and just have a reread to remind myself what it is that I wrote last time. So last time we wrote, as soon as Mrs. Davis entered the staff room, she threw open the cupboard door and searched for Mrs. House's special tea bags. When she finally found the tea bag box, she was shocked to find it empty. Suddenly, she remembered that she had used the last of the tea bags yesterday within her class's science experiment. Ah, yes, so my build-up was all about Mrs. Davis realising that she had accidentally used the last of Mrs. House's special tea bags. Okay, right, now I'm going to look at my plan that we wrote, and I'm just going to remind myself what it is that I said I was going to include within my problem. Of course, I said that I was going to have Mrs. Davis realising she accidentally used the tea bags within an art lesson. But we changed that, didn't we, to a science experiment. We were going to do some show, not tell, so I wanted my character to feel embarrassed. I didn't think she'd feel scared of Mrs. House, because Mrs. House was a very nice character. I thought maybe she might be embarrassed about what she had done. But rather than saying Mrs. Davis was embarrassed, this is where I was using the show not tell that we looked at last week. Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. Her palms began to sweat. What on earth was she going to do? So these are all of my show not tell sentences that I can now magnify and put into my paragraph. Okay, let's see where we are going to begin then. So we have got some speech at the start here, so I'm going to start my paragraph with some speech. Now when I'm writing, what do I need to remember at the start of every single paragraph? Well done if you said my indent. Now I've said that I'm going to include some speech, so I'm going to have some inverted commas. Now do we think that Mrs. House is the kind of character who's going to shriek, "Mrs. Davis, where are you? It's time for my cup of tea." No, I'm not sure Mrs. Davis was that kind of, Mrs. House, sorry, was that kind of character at all. She was a nice character, wasn't she? So let's have a think about what Mrs. House might say instead. I think that perhaps she might say, "Mrs. Davis, did you manage to make my cup of tea?" said Mrs. House. Okay, have a look at my writing so far. Can you spot any mistakes in there? Have a look for all of those mistakes that you see me make in class. Well done if you said that I needed some inverted commas after Mrs. House stopped speaking. "Mrs. Davis, did you manage to make my cup of tea?" Of course, I need my inverted commas after tea. Well done if you said I need some punctuation before those inverted commas. What type of punctuation will I need here? Well done if you said question mark, because Mrs. House is asking a question. Any other mistakes in there that you can spot at all? Of course, House needs a capital letter because it's her name. Mrs. and House are part of her name, so they both need a capital letter because they are a proper noun. Now, there's one more thing we can do in here to improve our writing. Mrs. Martin, you have used the word said. Don't you remember that in year 4 we took the word said and we threw it out of the window because we could use much better synonyms? What could I say instead of said then? Would it make sense to have shrieked here? No, I'm not sure Mrs. House is the kind of character that would shriek. Would it make sense to say shouted? I'm not sure that shouted would make sense either. What synonym can you think of? I'm thinking that perhaps instead of said, we might be able to say requested. Now I want to put some extra detail at the end of my sentence here. Maybe something that Mrs. House is doing at this point. Now, what do you think that a head teacher could be doing? Is she going to be typing on her computer? Is she going to be writing a letter? Is she going to be perhaps doing some shredding? I think maybe in my story, Mrs. House might be typing on her laptop. Mrs. Davis, did you manage to make my cup of tea? Requested Mrs. House as she continued typing on her laptop. There's my first sentence, so of course I need a full stop. Now this is where I'm going to put my show, not tell. So I'm not going to put Mrs. Davis was embarrassed, am I? Because we can show that Mrs. Davis was embarrassed. How could I show that Mrs. Davis was embarrassed? What might happen? Let's have a look back at our plan and see what we can magpie. We had her cheeks turning red, her palms beginning to sweat, and then our rhetorical question at the end. So Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. Can you spot where the missing apostrophe is in this sentence? Well done if you said it needs to go after the S in Davis, because the cheeks belong to Mrs. Davis, don't they? Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. What else did we say would happen to her if she was embarrassed? I remember. Her palms began to sweat. And now I want to put in my rhetorical question. What on earth was she going to do? Now I say rhetorical question, so I need a question mark, don't I? Mrs. Davis, did you like to make my cup of tea? Requested Mrs. House as she continued typing on her laptop. Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. Her palms began to sweat. What on earth was she going to do? I'm very proud of my paragraph, but at the minute, I'm thinking my story just doesn't quite flow. If you remember back to our build-up, in here we were in the staff room. Mrs. Davis was looking for a tea bag in the middle of a cupboard, and then all of a sudden I got onto my problem, and I said that Mrs. House is asking her while she's typing on her laptop if she's made her cup of tea. Well, that doesn't seem to flow very well, does it? I think perhaps I might need to just add a sentence in here at the beginning to make sure that my story really... I've got an idea. I think that Mrs. Davis is going to have to leave the staff room and go somewhere where she might bump into Mrs. House. But she probably doesn't want to bump into Mrs. House because she realises she hasn't made her cup of tea yet. So I'm going to start with my sentence with Mrs. Davis left the staff room. And what might she do? Where might she bump into Mrs. House, I wonder? I think I'm going to say Mrs. Davis quickly left the staff room and tried to sneak past the office. But it was no good. Then I'm going to put my dash for some extra information. But it was no good. Mrs. House had spotted her. Now I've added this sentence in. It links my build-up with my problem. So I didn't just have Mrs. Davis all of a sudden being in the staff room and then all of a sudden being near Mrs. House. I've added in this sentence to make sure there is cohesion, to make sure that my paragraphs fit together. Let's have a reread and see if this makes more sense. Mrs. Davis quickly left the staff room and tried to sneak past the office, but it was no good. Mrs. House had spotted her. Mrs. Davis, did you manage to make my cup of tea? Requested Mrs. House as she continued typing on her laptop. Mrs. Davis's cheeks turned red. Her palms began to sweat. What on earth was she going to do? Okay, now it is your turn. So I would like you to have a go at writing your problem for me. Now you might decide that you need to add in some extra sentences as well to make sure there is cohesion between your paragraphs, to make sure that your story flows. You definitely need to make sure that you've got some speech in there, so some inverted commas, and you definitely need to make sure that you have got some show, not tell as well. Now I have had 2 sentences of show, not tell, and then a rhetorical question. You might choose to put 2 sentences. Maybe you might choose to have 3 sentences within your story. Please do send them to me when you've written them so I can have a read through and see how wonderful your writing is.